It is now my honor to welcome to the congregation Shaarey Zedek Bima, Rabbi Rachel Shere. Rabbi Shere is a longtime chaplain at the Jewish Hospice and Chaplaincy Network. She served as a full-time pulpit rabbi at Adat Shalom Synagogue in Farmington Hills, where she became the first woman in Michigan to hold a conservative movement pulpit position. Rabbi Shere served there from 2004 until 2020. A native Detroiter and graduate of the University of Michigan, Rabbi Shere received rabbinic ordination from the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies at the American Jewish University. It is now my pleasure to welcome my friend and my teacher, Rabbi Rachel Shere.
Well, thank you to Rabbi Starr and the whole clergy here, and to all of you for giving me this opportunity to speak on Shabbat Shuvah. It really means a lot to me. It's been a long time since I've given a sermon, so we'll hope this goes okay. I want to dedicate this sermon actually to Larry Rockhind. I see Gladys here, and Larry played a very important role in some very important years of my life. Larry and Gladys together, of course. And his memory is always a source of happiness and strength to me, and I will forever be grateful. So Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova. So interestingly enough, just a little aside, does anyone know why we say Shabbat Shalom first and then Shana Tova? So yes, that's part of it. So there's a principle in the Talmud, Tadir Ushe'eno Tadir, Tadir Kodem, which means that the thing that happens a lot should be more important than the thing that just happens once in a while. And so Shabbat happens more often than the New Year. So we say that first as a way of remembering that it's incredibly important, because it's easy to take for granted the people and things that we do every day, right? When the cousins come in from out of town, it's very exciting. We might give them more attention than our own, family members who we see every day. So I think that's poignant today, because all of you are the ones who are here Tadir, always. I'm just guessing that if you're here for a third day in a row, that Shabbat is part of your observance. So Tadir Ushe'eno Tadir, Tadir Kodem. So Shabbat Shalom to all of you, and Shana Tova. So it's been an intense couple days, and so I'll start with two kind of lighter stories and then move into slightly heavier. It won't be that long, though, don't worry. So the first story is about these brothers, Tom and Steve. And Tom is often traveling, and he goes out of town, and Steve watches his house and his cat. So whenever he's out of town, he calls and checks on things. So he calls his brother, and he says, Steve, how's it going at home? And Steve says, it's okay, but your cat died. And Tom says, whoa, you just shocked me with that. I could have had a heart attack. Next time, what happened? I need you to tell me more gradually. What, I feel like I'm in shock. Tell me slowly and carefully what happened. So Steve says, the cat went out, he got on the roof, I got on the roof, I climbed out the window. Every time I tried to get the cat, he went to the other side of the roof. I called the fire department, they tried to get the cat. The cat fell off the roof, and they had the little sheet, but it kind of landed harshly, and it broke some of its little legs. So I took it to the vet, and at the vet, they were doing a surgery on the cat, and it had a heart attack on the table, and sadly enough, they couldn't save him, and he died. And so Tom says, okay, I can handle that story. I had some time to brace myself for what happened. Thank you. So next year, again, Tom goes out of town, and he has Steve watching his house again. So he calls a few days into his trip, and he says, how's it going? And Steve says, well, it's okay, but Mom's on the roof. And I have one more little story that this one you may know the punchline to, so when I get to it, if you know it, feel free to just say it out loud. Okay, so this one is about these old friends, Jack and Lenny. They've been friends for many, many, many decades. They love baseball. They talk about baseball because they played stickball when they were little kids in the street, and then they were on the Little League team at their elementary school. They played in middle school and high school. They played varsity. In college, they played some pickup games. And then when they had families, their children played baseball, and they went to every game together with their children. And then they brought their families to all the Tigers games. And they were huge baseball fans. So now they're elderly men, and they're sitting on a park bench. And Jack says to Lenny, "Do you think there's baseball in heaven?" And Lenny says, "I don't know. What do you think?" And Jack says, "How about we make a deal? Whichever one of us dies first, we'll come in a dream or somehow, and we'll tell the other if there's baseball in heaven." So unfortunately, later that month, Jack passes away. And Lenny is just waiting because he's so curious if there's baseball in heaven. And about 31 days after he dies, Lenny has this dream. And in the dream, Jack comes to him and says, "I have bad news and I have good news. What do you want?" And in the dream, he says, "I'll take the good news." So he says to him, "The good news is there's baseball in heaven." And he says, "So what's the bad news? You're pitching Thursday." So any of us, so the reason I tell these stories is any of us could be pitching Thursday, but we don't like to think about it. We almost pretend that it won't happen to us. It will happen to everyone else, but not to us. As a society, I think we're uncomfortable talking about death, our own and others, and we wait often until it's too late to talk to our loved ones about what they want and what we want. I think about death all the time because it's what I do now, every day, day in and day out. I work for Jewish Hospice and Chaplaincy Network, and when I'm not visiting people who are either in palliative care or hospice care, and talking to them about what's to come and what they hope for and what they want, I'm working with people who are bereaved. So it's really just threaded throughout my day, every single day. But for most people, I think the way we talk about death is more avoiding it. How can we avoid it? How can we sort of medicalize it and find a way to stave it off as long as possible? And sometimes we miss having important conversations because we're just talking about what we can do to delay it. And some of the things that we talk about, they're not actually prolonging life, they're prolonging death. And I think that the more comfortable we become with the fact that it will happen to all of us, and we can choose, just like with any life cycle event, we like to think about it in advance. We like to plan for it. We like to think about what would be the ideal. When you're going to have a baby, you think, what would be the ideal in this experience? It doesn't always happen that way, but you plan for it. You have a birth plan. You think about who you'd like to be there with you, what kind of pain management you'd like to have, and oftentimes you even write it down and share it with the people who you believe will be around you when the time comes. I think the inevitability of death doesn't turn death into a tragedy. It just turns it into something that we need to face. And in fact, there have been many studies, and probably you've all seen them, about people who had near-death experiences. They don't come back from the near-death experience bitter and angry and upset about the fact that they had it. They often emerge more grateful, more generous, more focused on living their lives with purpose and meaning. So the question is, if we want to be those people who live with gratitude and joy and purpose and meaning, do we have to somehow simulate a near-death experience? When we go to the doctor, should the doctor sort of flatline us for a few minutes just so that we can experience that and then come back? Of course not, right? That's not the way to do it. That said, Judaism gives us the perfect technology to simulate this near-death experience that can be life-changing. And what is that technology? It's Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur is one day a year where we simulate our own death. How so? It starts with the way that we're dressed, right? We come to shul traditionally in a kittel, which isn't just a pretty white robe. It's actually it's a shroud that we're going to be buried in. That's what traditionally is worn to synagogue on Yom Kippur. And then Kol Nidre starts, and the Aron HaKodesh is opened, and all of the Sifrei Torah are removed. So we're standing in front of an open and empty Aron. So do you know what the word Aron means in Hebrew? Aron can mean what is this called? The ark. It can mean the ark, right? But it also means a casket. An Aron is a casket. That's the word for casket in Hebrew. So when we stand at the beginning of Yom Kippur in front of an open and empty Aron, we're reminded of an open and empty casket that's waiting for each of us. I mean, it's scary, but it's also, it takes us to the edge of life and forces us to ask ourselves questions. So in addition to that, right, that's how the holiday starts. Then there's these 5 prohibitions that we have on Yom Kippur. And we don't eat and drink, right? We don't use perfume and oils on our bodies. We don't wear fancy leather shoes. We don't have sex, and we don't bathe. So all of these things, what do they have in common? They're not bad things. They're just very much of the body. They're things that are related to our physicality. And we separate ourselves from that for one day because ultimately we're more than our bodies. Then we have one day to think about, what is that more than? We're more than our bodies, so what is the more than? We embrace the impermanence of our lives in order to better understand what is permanent in our lives. For after the eulogies are given and the tears are shed and the earth is shoveled and the prayers are said, what's left? What remains? I was very moved a few weeks ago to have the experience of spending a Sunday with a bunch of young adults, well, probably aged 20 to about 50. That's young adults to me, for sure. I'm 50, the upper end of that, who came from Israel to our community, and they're all from the Gaza envelope, and they had all experienced some kind of extreme trauma on October 7th. And they mostly from the kibbutzim, and they were doing a program where they had all been chosen because they had come up with healing modalities. They'd come up with ways of helping with post-traumatic stress disorder, and whether it was art or music, different kinds of exercise programs, they all had a specific idea, and they were chosen to continue working on their idea and to come present it to communities in America. And so they had a couple hours on their last day here, and I was at a beach with them. And as they told us their stories, and it was just, the most horrible, heartbreaking stories you could possibly hear. And then we all got on a boat, and we went out on the lake, and one of them just turned on some music, and within 30 seconds, they were just singing and dancing, and it was Am Yisrael Chai, and the boat was rocking. And I really feel like I haven't been immersed in that much joy since October 7th. I mean, it was so extraordinary, and I thought they understand that we are all sort of on the brink of death. They saw that what happens. They saw death. They were up close with it, and it propelled them back to live with even more vigor and more strength and more resilience and more commitment to sucking the marrow out of every single day, to hugging one another, to holding one another. They hadn't known each other prior to the beginning of this program, and you would have thought that they were, the closest of friends and family by the way that they treated one another. So on Yom Kippur, we simulate this near-death experience. Why? So that the rest of the year we don't have a near-life experience. And what's a near-life experience? A near-life experience is thinking that we always have tomorrow. But as we were reminded yesterday, all we really have is Hayom. Hayom, to make our wrong things right. Hayom, to tell our loved ones how we feel. Hayom, to ask ourselves, is this the life I want to be living? Hayom, to ask ourselves, is this the world I want to be living in? And if not, what can I do about it? Hayom, today. For any of us could be pitching Thursday. That need not scare us if we've made the most of every single inning. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.